Hey, deserving listeners, we have a special guest talking with us today. As many of you know, on YouTube, I've been publishing these reaction videos to a reality TV show called Sister Wives. And as I have been reacting, I have all these questions, and sometimes I verbalize those questions on the episode where I'm thinking, I have no idea what sort of religious group these people come from, and I don't know the factors at play because they don't go into it on the show. And I would like to know information about that because it would really help me understand why these individuals are making those choices and whether or not they're being coerced or not and brainwashed. So Christine actually is a fan of the YouTube channel and reached out to me and said, well, I know a thing or two about this group. And she said, would you like to talk with me? And I said, yes, I would love to talk with you. And she agreed to come on the show. So welcome, Christine.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Christine. I am a former member of the AUB, Apostolic United Brethren, and I left that church about 10 years ago. So things have changed a little bit since I've been there, so I can share what I do know, but obviously I don't know everything. Things evolve over time.
Yeah. I mean, before we started recording, you said that your experience is just your experience and you can't speak for everyone who has been in the group or is in the group. You also mentioned you know people in the group now that would claim or would tell a very different story about how they experience it.
Right.
But I am curious as to your experiences and also what you imagine other people's experiences might be, whether it's good or bad. So AUB, Apostolic United Brethren.
Yeah, I still have a hard time saying that, pronouncing it.
Yeah, I assume it is the adjective version of apostle. So, and then it's brethren that are united. And this group operates mainly in Utah?
So there's a group here in Utah, and there's also, there's a couple actually, because there's one in Bluffdale, there's one near Mona, Utah, and then there's one in Montana. That's the one I grew up in, the one in Montana, in Pinesdale. And then there is also one in Mexico that's part of the same. And I think the reason why it was in Mexico originally is because polygamy was illegal here, but not there. So they could go there and get married and come back, kind of a thing.
And this group, this religious group, is affiliated with Mormons, correct?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they claim no affiliation. They don't want to be affiliated with polygamists. There was a document called the Manifesto where they basically put out a document saying we're done with polygamy, we're not doing that anymore. And then the polygamists now claim, and there's been several branching off with the polygamist groups, because now there's the FLDS, the AUB, and the Kingston group that I know of. But they all claim that some higher up in the LDS church gave them authority to continue practicing polygamy because the Lord wanted that law kept alive, even though it couldn't be practiced in the mainstream LDS church. So we call ourselves, in the group. Oh, also the group is that's what we say for short. We say the group, capital G, the group. Yeah, we would call ourselves Mormons, even though they wouldn't want us to.
Well, I yesterday just watched the episode of Sister Wives in season 3 in which Cody talks a bit about the history. They're doing that tour through the colleges in the East Coast, and he is presenting the history. So I will just speak from memory, and I don't know if this is true, and maybe I should have looked this up beforehand, and I'm actually looking at the Apostolic United Brethren Wikipedia page. From what Cody said, Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormons, told his following that God told him that polygamy was the way. And
that's correct. Yeah.
Mormons did that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then I'm guessing due to concerns about integrating into mainstream society in the early 20th century, the Mormon leadership decided to disavow or get rid of that practice to make them more appealing, I suppose, to general audiences. Also, there might have been concerns about being prosecuted or attacked.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure to discontinue it, and the leader at the time really felt that like there wouldn't be a church if they didn't change something. Like they would be, basically forced to stop practicing. So
Right. So he said 1910 was when they publicly announced that polygamy was no longer allowed, and also in that episode, or in that a number of episodes, they go back to Cody's hometown and they talk to his childhood friends, and they're all Mormons, or at least a lot of them are, like Ken, for example. I was always wondering why they had to flee from Utah to Nevada, because you'd think, well, would Utah be the most friendly to them because they're Mormon-ish, if you will? But I suspected, and Ken confirmed this, that for Mormons, they're the most upset and the most adamant against this practice because it
makes them look really bad.
Yeah, they have this history and they have the stink of that still on them, and they don't want that to be associated with them, so they come out real strong against that and judge them very harshly and are the most adamant criticizers of that practice. And it says there's 10,000 plus members. Does that sound about right to you, 10,000 plus?
Oh, wow. I thought it was closer to like half that, but I mean, I don't know. It's hard to estimate numbers. That's a lot. Well, actually, that makes sense because there's multiple groups, so there's probably like that many in each area. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the one in Mexico would be smaller, but I've never been over there. So I mean, yeah, that probably is. I know that's a lot.
And would the service look similar to other Mormon services?
It's a little different. So one thing that the AUB believes in strongly, or at least did when I was actively going to church, is they believe in speaking by the Spirit. So they don't believe in preparing talks at all. Like you don't prepare, you just get called on, and like they'll just call on you. Like you'll just be sitting there with your family, and they'll be like, "You over there, you come up here and say something," And so you have to. I mean, the idea is to kind of always be very like in a very spiritual space and like studying your scriptures and stuff so that you're always prepared to share a message or whatever. So
did you ever get called?
I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe my dad was leading one time and like maybe asked me to come up and just like bear my testimony, but nothing I didn't have to like talk very much. And then the only other main difference with the format, I think, is that in the LDS church, every time you end speaking, you say, I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And we didn't say that in the AUB. We didn't have to say that. So that was something I was part of. So when I left the AUB, I immediately joined the LDS church. And for me, that was like a good, because it was different, but it wasn't too different. So I was in, and then I've actually, within the last couple of years, I've left the LDS church too. And so it's been a really big transition for me. But so there were some differences that I had to get used to. Oh, and another thing that I totally forgot is the sacrament is totally different. Like when they hand out the sacrament in the LDS church, you have like individual little cups, and you take your little cup and then it's disposable. You throw it away. But in the AUB, literally everyone drank from like the same. I think they had 12 cups or something, and they pass them around. You drink from the same cup as everybody else. And so that was fun.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. What year were you born, just to get the listeners an idea of like what time span we're talking about?
I was born in 1993.
So 93, you're born into your family, and are they a part of AUB at that time?
Yeah. My mom was the second wife, and she wasn't much older than my dad's oldest daughter at the time, and so yeah, I was born. I mean, it was always like, for me, it was totally normal. Actually, I always assumed that I would just share my husband because that's just what we did. I do think my time in I want to say, I don't know the Brown family. Like, I know of them. I had acquaintances with them, and like I hung out with their daughter one time at a youth event and stuff like that. And I know of them, but I didn't, like, not personally, just so you know, I'm not like in on that.
Yeah. For some reason that just didn't occur to me. Yeah, that makes sense that you would have known of them because it's the same building, it's the same church that they went to, right?
Yeah, I mostly saw them at girls' camp because they were really involved with, Christine was the choir person, like she led the songs, and she was really spunky and outgoing and fun.
So for those who don't know Sister Wives, Christine is the third wife out of 4 on Sister Wives. And by the way, I'm only up to season 4, so don't spoil anything for me beyond that.
I haven't really, to be honest, I haven't even really like watched the show. I watched like the first season. So.
What was it like watching that first season for you?
It was, okay. So yeah. So when it was coming out, we all knew that it was coming before it was even aired. Like, we knew that it was like a big thing that the Brown family was doing. And so it was kind of like. You
were in AUB at the time when the show came out.
At the time. Yeah, I was.
And the show came out in like 2011 or 2012 or something.
Yeah. So I think it was kind of exciting, but at the same time, we didn't want to be excited. Like, people were not happy about it in the AUB. They were not happy about it at all. I think for some people, they were nervous that it would just make them look bad, especially because on the show, at least from the first season, that was the only one I watched, they didn't really talk too much about the spiritual side of it, or like really the doctrine or the church or anything like that. And I think that they did that on purpose because they probably just didn't want to share things that they hold sacred, But I think some people also kind of felt like, but you're showing half of it and not the other half, so it's like hard for people to understand. And also, they just felt like it was something like really. Have you ever heard that scripture from the Bible, like, don't cast your pearls before swine? That's kind of how people felt, like you're just kind of throwing it out there for the world to make fun of. So there was, and also I think it was like the first time that anybody had really gone public. And something about the AUB is that because it is illegal, there's a lot of secretism surrounding it. So. That was I think that was just really hard for a lot of people that they were going public with it. And I do think that the Brown family had good intentions. Like, they wanted to try to gain acceptance, and they wanted to try to legalize polygamy and things like that. But they weren't happy about that either, because one of the big arguments that, I think this was around the time that gay marriage was gaining traction. And so one thing that the Brown family said was like, well, it's a lifestyle, kind of like how gay marriage is, like, why is that legal and we can't do this legally? And that was extremely offensive to the leaders of the church. They were like, we're not going to legalize polygamy on the coattails of gay marriage. Like, they just thought that was disgusting. So I actually thought, because they spoke so distastefully of Cody over the pulpit, I assumed he was excommunicated. I don't think he has. I wasn't able to verify it. It doesn't sound like he was excommunicated, but they were just, they were really harsh. They were not happy with him at all. And they had actually advised him not to do the show, because he approached the council and said, I'm going to be doing this documentary. And they said, no, we don't want you to do a documentary. And the prophet at the time said, if you do this, you will lose your family. And so that's, I realize I almost spoiled something for you. I don't want to spoil.
Okay. Well, yeah, don't say anything more.
Okay.
So the leader of AUB is called a prophet?
Yeah. He's considered the prophet. Yep. He holds ultimate authority. He may as well walk and talk with Christ. Like, he's a big deal.
Okay. And whatever he says goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Exact obedience. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So when you were born, you enter into a family that has how many older siblings did you have at the time? Yeah, older full siblings at the time.
Oh, full siblings. Okay. Just 2. I'm the third in my family.
Okay. And then the first wife had how many kids at that point?
I don't know. I know she has 15 kids, but I don't know how many were born at the time that I was born. My dad has like somewhere around 30 biological children between 4 wives. So
you don't even know.
I'm not even, it's a little bit hard to count even, because some of the wives had children when they came into the family. So I'm like, well, do we count them? And then some of them have like passed away. There were some stillbirths. And so it's like, wait, which ones do we, so it's somewhere around 30 biological children.
Okay. So you enter into the family, you're the third of your mom. There's probably a dozen or more half siblings that you have from your dad and his first wife, who is a lot older than your mom is.
Yeah.
Did you all live in the same house?
So at first, we started out, we were living in Pinesdale in the community there. We lived in like a mobile home. And all of us did, and like squalor, complete poverty. Just like we didn't have a flushing toilet. Like it was just
like literally, you didn't have a flushing toilet.
Literally, yeah. And my mom gave birth in that house, like again and again, and unmedicated, like.
So did you have like an outhouse situation or like a?
I think they had a bucket. They literally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that normal for AUB families?
I don't think so.
What did your dad do for work?
When I was born, I don't know what he was doing for work. Later on, he was building. He was working for a company building high quality rifles, like they were like pieces of art, kind of. And then he was later on. He moved to North Dakota and started doing trucking, and we would only see him every like 3 to 6 months, literally. And so I was actually really hard on our family, because we just got so used to doing things a certain way. We were in our groove, and then he would come home and he would want like absolute structure, and we just weren't used to that, and we had to do what he said, so it was rough. And that was actually when it was around that time that my mom was kind of starting to accept that she just needed to leave him. And one of the big things for her was that, like, it's better when he's gone. Like, it's just so much better when he's gone. So she left him when I was like 19, I think. And that was about a year later is when I left the group too. My mom lived in that, I think her and the third wife lived in that mobile home for a little while together, but for the most part, they lived in separate mobile homes. And then what I do remember, because I was really young at that time that we were living in the community, we moved out of the community and we moved to it's like 30 minutes north of there, and then we each had separate houses on the property. So, but it was like within walking distance, we could just walk. And I have a sister who's she's a month older than me. She's my half sister. So I was always at her house or she was at my house, and then. We have a brother who is in the same grade as us in school, and so that was kind of cool because we could like share each other's math book. If one of us forgot, we'd do homework together. But we just told everyone at school that we were triplets, and they believed us, which is really funny to us because we don't look a thing alike. Not one of my sister has brown hair and brown eyes, and we just don't look anything like each other.
Right. So the public school that you went to, probably a lot of Mormons went to that school, and there would be a lot of stigma about polygamy. So you had to hide that.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that everyone knew, particularly the teachers. Like, I think they were really nice to not say anything, but they knew. They knew what was going on. Because, I mean, they can see that we each have, like, different birthdays, but all have the same last name. So...
What did that feel like to hide that?
I mean, when it's your life, you just normalize it. It's just like, that's just how it is, I was a little, I mean, I wasn't as secretive about it as my siblings were. Like, I was always pretty somewhat open about it. I just wasn't, I don't know. I didn't really feel ashamed about it, and nobody gave me a hard time usually when I did talk about it. They were just mostly interested. And so I I would always have friends over and stuff like that, but my siblings, they were like never invited anybody over, and they didn't like to talk about it. So,
and here you are talking about it.
Yeah. And well, it's important to me. It's important to me because, you know, I know there's lots of different kinds of like cults in the world, and they're all different, but they're all the same, you know? So I think that I think it's important to like spread awareness and talk about these things.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you said that you're in therapy, which is great. And also, if we end up going in a direction that is difficult for you emotionally to talk about or to remember.
Oh, I promise I'm fine.
Okay. So what do you mean that all cults are the same and that AUB is a cult?
Well, so I've been, because of my experience, I've like started to try to educate myself about cults. And sometimes I just watch like documentaries about different kinds of cults and stuff like that. And those are like, for me, they're like both triggering and like so validating at the same time. Because I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I went through. So I think that when you're in a cult, like it doesn't feel like there's another option. There's not. It doesn't feel like you could just get up and leave if you wanted to. I mean, and also you don't want to, because if you did, it's like, then you're risking your eternal salvation, you know? It's scary. It's scary to even challenge it. It's like,
even in your own mind, it's even if you have thoughts like, I wonder if this is wrong, that's a scary thought to entertain.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you'd also have to be rejected by your entire community.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at least that's the fear. Yeah. So
I've also been over the years looking into a lot of cults, usually because the listeners will ask me to do an episode or a deep dive on something. I did a recent deep dive with my co-host Umberto about the Duggars, another reality
I like
TV.
to watch about them too.
Yeah. And I hadn't really heard of them, didn't really know anything about them, but did a huge deep dive on them and IBLP. And although they're not polygamists,
it's like the same thing.
How so?
Well, it's a system where men are given complete authority and women they can't say anything, they can't do anything. They're just, for me, and again, this is my experience and I can't speak for anybody else, but for me it was like submission. Like, my dad taught me that, like, it's the hardest thing the Lord has asked you to do, but this is like basically your job in life, is to learn how to submit, and actually, that's a big part of why I'm in therapy, because like I wanted to please my dad. I wanted to be valued, and I became everything that he wanted me to be, and then to find out in adulthood that like, oh, that doesn't work. Like, it's so hard. So
how does it not work for you? I could imagine, but specifically for you? I've
historically been like an extreme people pleaser. And people actually don't like that, like they actually don't. And it doesn't, like, nobody will, I always thought that if I was submissive and kind and put everybody's comfort before my own, that I would be valued and cherished and respected. And that's not how it is. It's like
maybe in the AUB you would, right?
Maybe. I doubt it. Not even then. I don't think so, Yeah, I just think, when people see that you're a complete pushover, then they push you over. That's what they do. So
did that happen to you?
I feel like that's been my life experience, yeah. Just like learning that unless I can stand up for myself and say, no, I don't want that, then people don't know, and they see somebody that's like willing to help over and over and over again, and of course everybody needs help, so it's just, that, and again, this is my dad, and not everybody's like my dad, but yeah, it was like complete compliance, like. And it took me so long to realize that. I didn't even, like, again, it's just normal for you when you're in it. But I went and visited him as an adult, and he wanted me to do something that I was uncomfortable with. And I said, Dad, I'm not comfortable doing that. And he said, but that doesn't matter if you're comfortable with it. And it was like light bulb. I was like, oh my gosh, you're everything that is wrong with me. Like, yes, I do need to feel comfortable. I do. And so
that was when you realized that you
I have problems and I need to start working on, because I was pregnant with my first child at the time. And so I was like, the healing has to start now because I can't do this to my kids. So.
You have another person that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
Do you want to say what it was that your dad wanted you to do? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's fine. He wanted me to, well, I had done something to piss him off, not intentionally, but I did. And he would frequently, and I kind of forgot about this, but when we were kids, he would gather the family together and like publicly humiliate you in front of the family. And that's what he was like, okay, well, so we have this conflict, and he's like, hey, we're having a family meeting and we're going to talk about this. And I just said, no, I'm not going to go to the family meeting so that you can humiliate me in front of the whole family. I'm not doing it. And he would say that's not what he was going to do, but I remember, and that was something that, I mean, a lot of us are traumatized from those. And he didn't just do it to the kids; he did it to the wives too. I remember him getting down in my mom's face like she was a child, like in front of all of us, and it was extremely tense. I think it was really uncomfortable for the other sister wives too. Wow!
So not only emotional and verbal abuse to the victim, but everyone else is being vicariously traumatized.
Yeah, because like you're next if you piss him off. And I was terrified of my dad. I really was. I always thought I had a good relationship with my dad because I was a good kid. I was the one that I hardly ever pissed him off. But I mean, it was because I was scared. I was really scared. And so I was able to keep up with a good relationship with him for a long time, and then after that experience a couple of years ago, we've gone low contact, not no contact, but low contact.
So I'm still curious because this seems like an epiphany moment for you.
Yeah.
What was it that you had done to piss him off that he wanted to publicly humiliate you for?
So he's a family member, but he's not one of the siblings. But anyways, so he wanted to invite us. He was just trying to be friendly, and he invited us over. And there was alcohol and some adult games, and my siblings were teenagers at the time. And so I went and said hi, but at this time I was also an active member of the LDS church, and so drinking is not part of our values, and and everything. And so we stayed and we played like one round to be polite, and then we left.
At this point, you're in your 20s. This is after you left.
I was like 27. Yep.
So you had already left the AUB.
I left I had left the AUB.
And you and some of your siblings that were underage were going to this family get-together.
Yeah.
And there were drinking, and you say adult games, like drinking games?
No. Well, I don't know. I don't know. It was more like, what's that game called? Like Cards Against Humanity, just like more like, games that would be considered very inappropriate, like for our beliefs. And so. And
were you like supposed to be in charge of your younger siblings?
Apparently, which I didn't know that. And so, anyways, I just was talking to my mom on the phone the next day, and I just mentioned, I was like, oh, also, I don't know if you want to do like a curfew or something for the teenagers, but I do know that they were at this gathering. I just said goodnight because I'm not their mom and I can't tell them what to do, but just so you have the information if you decide as the parent to do anything about that. And so she was furious at me because I was supposed to be watching them, and she just felt like I was their older sister. I should have done something. She called my dad, and she was really mad. And my dad, he didn't want to be in trouble from her, especially because she had chosen to leave him, and he wants that to be a good relationship still. And so it was upsetting to him that I basically, like, he felt like I tattled on him. I think he's like, you could have just told me, and I would have handled it, which I feel like that was such an easy, like, I would have happily been like, I'm sorry, I'll talk to you next time if that works better, but it didn't have to be like a big drama fest, but that's just.
Oh, I see. So your parents divorced at this point, and the teenagers were under the authority of the father for this period of time?
Yeah, we were all over in North Dakota visiting my dad. Yeah.
And your mom was saying, okay, I'm sending the kids to you, so ex-husband of mine, you better be a good father.
Yeah. And I think she was kind of hoping that she was feeling more comfortable with it because I was going. But I guess I wasn't aware that I was supposed to be in charge.
No one said it to you at all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that given that you were brainwashed and abused to be a pleaser, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in this moment, because you have two people, your parents, who are at odds because of their maybe ongoing conflict regarding their divorce, but also at the party, you have your siblings who don't want their time to be ruined by their big sister. So
yeah, so it was like, what do I do? I can't. Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah.
And even if it was mildly implied that you were in charge, which is questionable to begin with, I mean, that should be explicitly stated, like, by the way,
you're in charge of them.
Yeah, and here are the rules.
Well, maybe it was implied because, growing up in polygamy, like, parentization is like the only way you survive, so those siblings are like 10 and 12 years younger than me. And so I did help my mom raise them. They were like my babies, so maybe it was like she just thought I would assume that role again,
And I mean, I would say that you went above and beyond anyway, because you did reach out to your mom and say, I think some things need to be changed to make sure that these kids are doing the right thing. If my older sibling had done that to me, I'd be like, hey, don't tattletale. Like, come on, we're siblings.
Yeah, and that put me in a super awkward position too, because now my siblings are like, you ratted out on us, Yes. I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm trying.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a hard situation. You can't win. So that's what your dad said. Okay. Do you think your dad felt humiliated or something?
I think so. I mean, I imagine so. I think so. I mean, that's what I assume. I wish that he would have just talked to me about it, just like me and him, And
Yeah.
I told him I'm happy to talk to you about this, but I'm not going to do it in front of the whole family. That's not what we're going to do.
Yeah, because you predicted that he was going to do his typical pattern of trying to humiliate you and corner you,
Yes.
maybe even get allies to back him up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Against you.
Yep.
Yeah. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So a lot of us, including myself, we really wish that we had more time in the week, There's always so much to do. And if we don't watch it, we might pack our entire day with obligations, never taking any time for ourselves. I mean, think of all the things you would do if you had more free time, like going to lunch with a friend, or even, God forbid, going to therapy. But it's kind of a catch-22, because without therapy, we might be putting ourselves on the back burner, never allowing ourselves to take time for ourselves, to focus on us and our needs. So sometimes we just need to take that leap and allocate that 1 hour a week to therapy, that 1 hour a week just for us. Well, one place you can find a therapist is at BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk. That really is interesting, because in Sister Wives, up until the point, end of season 3, there are a lot of family meetings, and everyone is there, I don't know how many kids there are, something like, once Robin joins, I think it's something like 17 kids or something, and 4 adults, and there's this thing that Cody will be presenting, like, okay, we are thinking about adding another member to the family. What do you think? Or we're thinking about moving, or we're thinking about this sort of thing. Or presumably they had these meetings, we're thinking about going on a reality TV show. And I have all these questions as to the power that the members, including the sister wives, have to go against the grain. And occasionally it would happen. Some of the kids and some of the sister wives will voice their opposition to something, but there could be a lot of other people that are secretly or silently opposing. And also, even if you're opposing, you don't usually get your way, I've witnessed in this format, because who are you among, you're one of almost 20 people or more than 20 people. Your vote, if the majority says, yes, we're doing this, then it doesn't matter really what you think. And you might even start believing that about your life. It's like, well, the majority rules here, so I just have to put up with it, you know?
Yeah.
That could be quite demoralizing. Did you experience things like that where there would be family meetings?
Oh yeah, there was always family meetings, and they were, for me, they were always extremely tense. It was just really, really uncomfortable. And I didn't feel the confidence to say anything, but my brothers often did. They would, you know, there was I feel like there was a lot more talk among the males in the family than the girls. I feel like we just like didn't really want to say much, but I mean, well, that's not, I mean, maybe like some of the more confident girls, but they were also the ones that were in trouble all the time, and I didn't want to be in trouble all the time, so I just didn't say anything. But yeah, we had lots of family meetings. Sometimes they were awful, actually.
Yeah. So I'm guessing in your church there were a variety of families, a variety of fathers, because they're the bosses of each household.
The head of the household, yes.
So there's probably a variety of experiences. You might have a father who managed that system differently. So there's a lot of different experiences.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that. But how did the church give your father the fuel to have a family and have a parenting style that had a lot of intimidation and control?
Well, we are taught that we're to submit to our husbands or our priesthood head, you know, so our dad, if you're a woman. And we're also taught that, like, you know, you can give your opinion and you can hope that the priesthood head takes it into account, but in the end, it's his decision. Even for the wives, like, you can say what you want to say, but it's his decision to make in the end. And they believe that that's the way it needs to be, because otherwise there's going to be conflict between the wives. So the husband needs to have a backbone and to be able to say, like, no, this is what we're doing. And like, so that way there won't be any bickering about it.
Yeah. And is there explicit talk about, or else you'll go to hell, or what's the threat if you go against this?
I don't think there's anything in the doctrine that says that. Just that we're taught that it's just very inappropriate, and it's kind of where our value lies, is like in our ability to be a support to our husband or to our dad or whatever. It's just more of a culture thing, and it's just awkward. It's really awkward if you speak out of turn, you know, then everyone just kind of looks at you like, okay, like she's a wild card, you know. Okay.
So public shaming, ostracization, stigmatizing, labeling you as not a good person.
Yeah, it's more of just like a feeling than anything else. Like nobody said it out loud.
A feeling of rejection, and you're going against the grain. There's you're doing something wrong, and all of us agree.
Yeah, like the women can't even, like, you can't call the family together for prayer. Like, that would be the husband's job. You can't call a family meeting. That's also viewed as like extremely inappropriate. That's, you know, you have to honor the priesthood head and let them do that kind of stuff.
Okay. What was the beginning of the process of you leaving?
So for me, okay, I actually do have to think about what I want to say. Okay, my whole purpose of doing this is to kind of like share my story, and, you know, I guess that there's probably other people out there like me too, so I'll just go ahead and kind of, maybe it's TMI for some people, but I'll just kind of say my experience. I feel like that I really tried my hardest to be a faithful member. You know, I was very well conditioned. I planned on sharing my husband, all those things. You know, I was devoted to this religion. And again, I tried really hard to be a submissive woman, an exactly obedient woman, you know, all those things that my dad taught me to be.
How old were you when you got married, just as a side note?
Oh, I didn't get married in the AUB. I didn't get married until after I left.
Oh. Oh, so you're thinking as a older
as a
teenager,
young woman, yeah.
You're thinking, okay, once I get married, I will be.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that it's really hard. It's so hard because we're also taught, like we have to be chaste. We have to wait until we're married to have sex or anything like that. And so those two things are like such a big deal, and it's like it's actually tied to your worth, like if you aren't a virgin. And so I was dedicated to being the best that I could be, but it just doesn't work to tell women to be exactly obedient to what a man tells you to do and also don't have sex, so it's so for me it was like I really was trying to do my best, but at the same time, I didn't have the autonomy and the confidence to say no to people, and I was such a massive people pleaser. And so for me, I didn't even leave the AUB because I thought it wasn't true. I thought I was unworthy. I was like, if this is the Lord's true church, then He doesn't want me in it because I'm bad. And so I left and I joined the LDS church, and that was kind of like two birds with one stone for me too, because that way it was like, well, I won't. So okay, here's another thing to understand is that in Mormonism there's three tiers of heaven. There's the celestial kingdom, terrestrial kingdom, and telestial kingdom. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I was basically thinking, okay, well, I'm not good enough to go to the best heaven, but at least I'll go to maybe I could go to the second one or something. And so when I joined the LDS church, they also baptize you as a new member. And for me, that was like, yay, now I'm washed clean of like my sins. So I can feel okay about myself. And that worked for me for a while. So that was why I left. It wasn't until after that I kind of started deconstructing and kind of challenging some of the ideas that I'd grown up with, which is really hard to do because, it's like challenging the law of gravity. Like, well, I think it's dumb that things go down, like, why should they go down? It doesn't feel like, it's like, well, it just is. It just is the way that it is, It feels silly to even question it.
Yeah, that's what I've come to realize treating some former cult members about how many aspects of the way that they see the world has been an indoctrination into a way of thinking. There's all these little things about gender and marriage and love and God and what are good thoughts, what are thoughts that are allowed, is anger okay? Do you have those kinds of experiences?
Oh yeah. For me, it's like it's kind of maybe silly, but like I actually try to challenge myself to like wear a tank top sometimes, or I don't know. I wonder if I'll ever be comfortable drinking alcohol. Like it's just something that to me is like danger. Like don't do it. And so there are definitely things that I'm still working on, and sex is a big one too. Actually, I'm glad that I am in a committed marriage now, and hopefully never have to think about it because. I don't know if my husband died and I had to think about like, am I going to have sex before marriage? Like, I don't even want to think about it because it's just so ingrained in my thinking is like, that's wrong. We don't do that. So.
Yeah. When you watched season 1 of Sister Wives, given your experience, what do you think was happening behind the scenes that the viewer isn't seeing? Anything?
I do know that in general there's a massive amount of abuse in the group. It's just, I don't think it's because like polygamy doesn't cause abuse, but it's just that it's the perfect environment for abuse to thrive because polygamy is illegal. It's unlikely that you're going to go to law enforcement to seek help because you're already doing something that's illegal. So I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it's just as likely that they were abused as like anybody else in the group, which is very likely. So.
Yeah. I think that there's a possibility, of course I can't know, but groups like this might attract high control individuals because they see that, if you're a guy and you have an inferiority complex and this group comes along and says, you, by definition, by God decree and by prophet decree, you are in charge ultimately, and what you say goes, and we will support you in essentially abusing your wives and your kids.
You can be surrounded by wives and children that worship you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That worship, and it's built into the system. And as the father with several wives and dozens of kids, by definition, you are special and sought after because, sure, my biological mom is there all the time, but dad is only here some of the time. And that makes him very, very special. And I see that everyone else is competing for him, my 30 other siblings. And so I better shine. And if he compliments me or criticizes me.
Yeah. We liked it a lot more when my dad wasn't there because there was just not as much rigidity and structure. And when my dad was home, my mom had a home cooked meal prepared for him. She, you always want to try to make it, and I think it's also a confidence thing too for the women, because it's I want him to like being around, because I just want to have the confidence that there's no reason for him not to like being around, and I don't need to be jealous of the other women or anything like that, so it's just you kind of do it for yourself too. I hear women from this group tell me all the time, I like having sister wives. I like only having to prepare a home cooked meal every third night. That's really nice. And I'm well, that's great, but you're looking on the bright side, because my husband can eat cereal with me if I don't feel like cooking. You don't have to prepare a home cooked meal every time, but I do think it's a thing that you just want to try to make that time special. You want him to like being there. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because in Sister Wives, when the sister wives are talking to outsiders, and the outsiders are saying, don't you want a husband all to yourself? I mean, how do you live like that? And their response always is, do you really want a man there all the time? It's such a bother to have a husband there all the time. I want my alone time. And I've always, in my head, I'm thinking, certainly alone time is important, and you can certainly have alone time if you want to, but what you're saying is when dad is around, you have to shine. It's
work. Yeah.
You have to be a slave. You have to be perfect. You have to be available and in a good mood. You are competing against these other women, and you're also trying to be this dutiful wife. You have to put yourself on the back burner and your needs on the back burner. So of course you're not going to want a guy around all the time, because that's misery.
Yeah, and I don't think they see it that way. They think that it's just, they're just trying to, I don't know, make it a good time for him or whatever. But I remember my mom wanted us on our best behavior when dad came home and stuff like that. It was totally a thing. And it was misery for us too. We hated it. We'd always want to know, is dad coming home tonight? And it was ugh, I don't even want to be here.
So why did your mom enter this polygamous relationship to begin with?
So my mom, this is something else that I wanted to say. My mom is an Allred. She's the granddaughter of Rulon Allred, who's the founder of the AUB.
Was Christine also from this?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's something that I wanted to comment on. I've been seeing a lot of super fans and everybody saying that Christine is like royalty, but I just want everyone to understand that this man has a massive posterity. So I wouldn't really call it royalty. It's you are a direct descendant, but it almost feels like so is everybody. There is a ton of us. I asked my, one of my family members recently who does a lot of genealogy. He had 465 grandchildren. So it's a lot. So, but I imagine for someone because Cody's family was a convert, from what they're converts. So maybe for him it was so he could be more on the inside, and so maybe that's a good thing. But anyways, I just wouldn't call it royalty, is all I'm saying. But anyways, so yeah, my mom was born into the church. So It was just a part of, that's what she would do. But my dad and his first wife, they were converts, and they came from the LDS church.
Has anyone else in your family left the group, like your mom or siblings?
Yeah, my mom left. Actually, of my dad's 30 kids or something, only 2 of them have stayed. And he's still married to 2 of his wives, but 2, the first and second, my mom, have also left.
Left the church?
Yeah, left him, and they both joined the LDS church after that.
Okay, interesting. When did she leave? Before you or after you?
She left before me. She joined the LDS church, and then and so then I think. Sorry, what was the question?
Did your mom fully disavow the polygamy and the AUB? Or was she just saying, I don't want to be around my ex-husband, so I'm just going to go to another church, and it might as well be an LDS church? What
I
was
think
it?
at first, it was step by step. Because at first, even the way she left my dad was she asked for a formal release from the AUB priesthood, and they granted it to her. So I think she planned on...
Formal release from the religion?
From my dad. It's basically like asking for a divorce, but you ask for a release because you're spiritually married instead of legally married. And you can't be divorced unless they say you're divorced. So you have to get approval from them. And it was kind of hard for my mom because she had to basically, she had to get, you have to have a good reason. There has to be basically abuse or breaking of covenants or something like that. You can't just say my husband and I don't really get along and we don't like each other and we don't want to be married. That's not a good enough reason. So she had to dig, basically bring up a lot of dirt on my dad in order for them to let her out. And she didn't like doing that because she's I didn't want to say all these bad stuff. It's kind of personal, but she did that. And then after she was separated from my dad, then there were, and it's kind of the culture is everybody wants to take care of each other, and to marry somebody who is either divorced or widowed, especially if they have children, in Robin's situation, that would be your priesthood duty. You wouldn't want to leave a woman with kids without a husband. And so it's there was a lot of people reaching out to her oh, you can marry my husband, we don't want you to be alone. And she really didn't want to. I mean, she was just kind of saying, she's I feel I've done my time, maybe the Lord will still let me into the celestial kingdom because I was married to this guy for 20 years or whatever. So she just didn't. So she just, I think that's when she's kind of started looking more into the LDS church.
It's pretty sad. I'm very sad for your mom that she saw marriage as doing time.
Yeah. Yeah. She literally said that. She's I feel I've done my time. And I remember her sister, my aunt, being I don't think that's how that works. So there was a lot of pressure for her to be married as a plural wife again, but she didn't want to, and so she decided to join the LDS church because they still believe in Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, but just not the polygamy part, and she didn't want to do that. Yeah.
And so did she ever officially leave and disavow polygamy?
Yeah, she has now. Now she's kind of she now realize she feels that it was something that she should have pursued in the first place, but it's just part of her child, the way she grew up.
So what was it like to watch your mom do that? It sounds like your mom did that when you were a teenager.
Yeah, I give my mom a lot of credit. My mom is a hero in that way. And her and I, we've had to have a lot of healing conversations because she was doing a lot of healing when she was raising me, and so by definition, she's the source of a lot of my trauma. But I also recognize that she, that was part of her norm. And so, but also I always tell her, my healing journey started when yours did. As soon as I saw her leave my dad, that was the first time it occurred to me that my experience matters, if she doesn't deserve to be treated like that, then maybe I don't either.
Wow. Wow.
And I think she's totally a pioneer for doing it. She was the first woman in her family to leave polygamy.
Wow. That must have been really, I mean, how did she get the courage and the strength to do
I don't know. I think just she just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, really, I think it was just absolute hell for her, and so she couldn't do it. And she said that she talked herself in and out of leaving my dad like for years and years and years. She would be like,
did she have any support?
I think she did have support in leaving my dad when she decided to do it, and I think she was surprised by that actually, because in polygamy, divorce is it's just not even in our vocabulary. We just don't do it, and so I think she was a little surprised that once she decided to, then people were like, "Yeah, your husband's a jerk. You should leave. That makes sense, you know." And so she was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think I will." So
even other group members?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that really says, it seems like it's this weird combination of old school polygamy, like backwoods 19th century Mormon polygamy, like just weird, those old pictures that you see of these like families in front of their little shack, you know, it just, not to stigmatize that, but it's
like a mashup.
It has this really old feel to it, and this very out of touch feel to it, very different from mainstream American culture. On the other hand, when I watch Sister Wives, I see a lot of modern contemporary attitudes in everybody, including Cody.
Yeah.
The women, the Sister Wives, don't come across, and every family's different in the group, but these Sister Wives, and they're all different among themselves, but they don't seem like they are as brainwashed and as oppressed as the way things would have been in the past. It just seems like this really weird combo. And the kids go to public school, for example, and have friends who aren't even Mormon, right?
Sometimes there is a private school as well that where they teach only. Yeah.
They show these scenes where they're interacting with kids, and the parents are encouraging them to just be friends with anybody. They're also saying, we don't want you to stray from the way, but they're not heavy-handed seemingly about it. Maybe there's more subtle control mechanisms I'm sure there are behind the scenes, but it's just this weird combo, and it feels like a recipe for disaster, because in order for a cult to exist, you have to isolate the individuals. You can't have them mixing with other people that have other ideas, that have freedom. You need to us versus them. And the only way you can us versus them is if your members don't have any real contact with them. But being on a reality TV show, and it is opening up the boundaries of this particular family, and it just seems like it just wouldn't work to sustain the cult. Like you said, of all your 30-something siblings, only 2 of them are still in the group. That's not a recipe for sustainability of a cult. You have to have a greater conversion rate than
it's not going to work. They'll absolutely, a lot of people are leaving now. I mean, it's getting more and more common, and also they're gonna outbreed themselves, because one guy basically populated the entire church, and then there's some other names but almost everybody has to marry like their second cousin at least now, if you want to marry within the group, and so it's not going to work. And there's no kind of missionary. Maybe they'll change it to where there's like a missionary outreach, but right now there's not, mostly because only men are interested, there's not a lot of women that will want to join.
Well, so that brings me to another question, because upon watching season 1, I'm thinking, well, wait, so if every guy is marrying on average like 3 women, that means that 2 guys have to lose out, right? And being gay is not allowed in this group. And so you've got to be in a heterosexual marriage. So I'm thinking, how does that mean for every Cody, there's 2 other guys who are just single? And I did some research, and you tell me, but what I found was there's this whole phenomenon called like the Lost Boys, and there's all these boys who are essentially kicked out of the group. So that's what you're talking about. The Lost Boys it is something that happened with the FLDS. But that's not
associated. Well, I guess I can't say it's not associated, because they used to be the same group until they branched off. But that was the FLDS. The AUB, they wouldn't ever kick you out. In fact, it's kind of like really awkward for those boys, because you're taught that like your eternal progression doesn't begin until you're married. Like, you can't even have a calling, and so they just, they hang on way too long. There are a lot of single men that just they keep waiting, and they believe that if they're faithful enough, something will happen, but they mostly just stay single.
Really?
Yeah, or they leave, or they finally decide, if I want a family, then I'm probably gonna have to look elsewhere. And
so in your church, there was a bunch of single guys in their 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
As you say, waiting for what? Waiting to be assigned a woman, or?
No, they don't get assigned. So that's also the FLDS. In the AUB, you can choose who you want to marry, but they're just waiting to find somebody to date and court, because it's courting in the AUB, but so basically, if you're married, then you would ask about another young woman. Like, you would approach the prophet and say, we're interested in asking so-and-so if they would like to come into our family. And if he approves it, then you can talk to her father. And if your father's okay with it, then you can ask her. And then that's like the correct way to go about it for like multiple wives. But for just the first wife, you can kind of court whoever you decide to. Well, you have to ask their dad, but.
Okay. Why do you think, of the guys that you would see anecdotally that were single, longer than the other guys, why do you think they were single?
Oh, I don't know. Well, because like the babes, like the really hot guys, like they have all the wives. Like there's some stiff competition.
So to speak. Yeah. So for me in my cultural pocket, that's what I would assume, but I can't apply that to this group, but it sounds like that does apply. Okay. So if you're a babe, if you're if you're a hottie, then how many wives might someone have?
Usually it maxes out around 3 or 4, usually. A lot of people just stick to 2. But I think the prophet right now has like 8 or 9 wives. So is
it a badge of how hot you are and how cool you are to have a bunch of wives?
They don't intend for it to be that way, but it just inherent, like it just is, because it's like,
yeah, if you would have 5 16-year-old boys are friends. Yeah. And one of them ends up with 5 wives, and the other 4 guys end up with none, and they meet up for, I guess I was going to say a beer, but they can't do that. So, and they can't have coffee. So throw the ball around or something. Okay. So, and they're 30, and these other 4 guys are just looking at their hot friend and thinking like, God damn, and you can't have sex before marriage. So you're just, and
you're just out of luck. Yeah,
I'm guessing you're not supposed to masturbate either, right?
Nope.
I'm just going to, So you're just a volcano ready to explode, and you're looking at your friend, and the friend is just like, oh boy, it's like 4 wives. It's like a lot of, I gotta like rotate around, and it's actually pretty difficult, and like that's rough,
Yeah.
And I also wonder, certain market forces, like the image the analogy that popped in my head was when you're buying a house, and maybe you know this, Christine, but I've been told by real estate agents that if there's been a price reduction in a house, it's because that information is public, when you're looking at the listing.
Okay.
That even though it might be a great house, no one wants to buy it because there's this perception of it.
Like, nobody wants it, that's why they had to lower the price. Yeah.
Exactly. And so even though they might have reduced it to a price that if they had started with that price, it would have sold right away, no one will buy it just because of that bias. You're coming of age. What age do the women typically start looking to get married?
18. Yeah, you don't want to you don't want to be single for too long.
Okay, so you're 18, and I guess the nice thing is if you're a woman, you're more likely to find a partner and a family because you can always be a second or a third or a fourth, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these guys that, so that really kind of flips it on its head, because in some ways the women, well, you tell me, they might even have some power because they have the volition,
to choose.
unless they're being forced to choose someone particularly earlier than they would want to. I don't know, well, anyway, before getting to that, my point is that, you're coming of age, you're 18, and you're looking around, and you're just like, okay, now it's time to choose. And you're like, well, that guy has 3 wives, so obviously he must be quite a thing.
He's a big deal. I'll go with him, yeah.
Those 4 other guys that are, they don't have a wife yet, so what's wrong with those guys? Like, there must be something wrong. It's like going to the store, and there's 2 different kinds of a product, and one product, there's only 2 left, and the other product, it's fully stocked. You're like, well, there must be something wrong. I'll just go with this one, and it creates this market force
But I do think there's also a desire to be a first wife. So, I mean, because then you get time to be the only wife, at least for a little while, to just get to know him and you for a while. So,
Christine on the show, Sister Wives, said she always wanted to be a third wife. Why do you think that is?
I can only speculate, but my theory for that is just like there's just really strong gender roles, and so like we were talking before, like it's just a lot of work to be a wife, and well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, even as a third wife, it's a lot of work because then you gotta watch all your sister wives' kids potentially too. So
yeah.
And maybe also she felt that because typically the last wife struggles the most when he takes another wife, because they haven't had to go through that yet. So maybe, and I feel like most people probably wouldn't take a fourth wife. And I feel like maybe that was an exception because Robin had young children. And so it's like, well, somebody needs to take care of her. And so maybe that's kind of why they felt pushed to take a fourth. But like, maybe she kind of thought, I'll be the last one and I won't have to go through that hard transition of like sharing him with somebody else. That would also make sense.
Yeah. Okay. This would be you speculating, of course, and if you don't want to speculate, then don't. But you have Mary and Janelle and Christine and Robin. On the show, they will say things like, we want to do this. We like being a sister wife. They even have statements that indicate that the women are the ones mainly pushing Cody to have more wives. But I can't necessarily trust that because they might just be saying that, or they might feel like they have to say that, or they might really want it. Because, in my reaction videos, one of the things I talk a lot about is polyamory. That's the closest thing to my world that I've experienced with, not with myself in my own life, but I have a lot of clients and friends that are polyamorous. And there are some where it's one of one gender and 3 of the other. Like I have a friend who is it's a woman and 3 husbands, and the husbands don't want other partners, or the other involvements are quite minor, and they live together and they have kids and whatnot, and they're perfectly happy, and they chose that because they could have chosen anything, right? Whereas in the group, there's less of a choice, right? I mean, it sounds like there's some free will, but
it's interesting. It's like, so it's a little bit of both. So I guess I'll start by saying that, I mean, we're taught that this is the only way that we're like, unless we live this law of plural marriage, it's the only way that we're going to be able to be in the celestial kingdom. Like, it's one of God's laws, and if that's one of the things you have to do if you want to be in the celestial kingdom. And of course you do want to be in the celestial kingdom because that's where your family is going, so you want to be with your family, and like you'll have, they kind of teach that, like, even if you're in the second or the third heaven, like, you'll still be in heaven and it'll still be great, but you'll have regrets because you're there for eternity and you can't move up after that. And so there's that. So it kind of feels like it's not a choice, as well as that, like, you're taught that we've been chosen, like we've been reserved for, like, we were born under the covenant, so we're responsible to also live it. And if we then reject it, it will be harder for us to get into heaven because we had the truth and we rejected it. So in that way, it feels like it's not a choice. Like, you kind of have to do it. But in another way, it does feel like it's a choice, because once you're like a teenager, they're really encouraging you to pray and to find out for yourself if it's true. You know, they're like, you should pray and find out for yourself if it's true. And if you don't gain your own testimony of it, then you shouldn't do it. You know, like, so it's certainly like it's kind of good for them because it has the appearance of that you chose it, you know. So there's that. As far as the women like kind of being the ones to push for other wives, it is kind of set up that way because I remember it being taught over the pulpit. Like, I've heard that this guy, whoever, I don't remember who the speaker was, but he said, I've had young men tell me that they love their wife too much to take another wife. And he said, I'm telling you, if you believe that, you don't love your wife enough, because you don't care enough to get her to the celestial kingdom, which is where we want to go. And so there was a lot of pressure to live plural marriage. And I think that it's just, since we all believe it and it's what we all want to do, it's like, well, we'll help him out, because it's kind of awkward for him to like go approach a woman. Like, he's a married man, and it would look weird and creepy if he were the one to do it. So I'll do it, since we all want to go to heaven. You know, it's like more appropriate for the women to reach out to each other. And I had a situation where, when I was still in the AUB, a family asked about me, and it was the woman, you know, and she's really, if I had chosen to stay, it might have been a good fit, because she was really cool, and we were friends and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it just saves everybody a lot of awkwardness if the women talk to each other about it.
Interesting. Wow. That really sheds a lot of light on the inner decision making of the women. That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, the major question that I have is, you know, take Mary, the first sister wife. If she lived she grew up in a world, not necessarily outside of AUB, because outside of AUB, it's not like we're wonderful in mainstream American society regarding sexuality and sexism and monogamy versus polyamory. But in a perfect world, if Mary grew up in a world where all paths forward were okay and taught about and modeled, what would Mary do to meet her needs? Which path would she take? Might she have taken the same path she took on the show in reality? Or would she have taken a different path? That's the big question that I have, because it's possible that of the happy paths forward for her, this was one of those paths. But we'll never know, because she was born into this system,
right,
and she was indoctrinated, and she might not even know, one, what she wants, and two, what the alternatives really are. Because
there are no alternatives.
Right. Yeah. And of the alternatives that you know about, because you know about the outside world, you're told a lot of bad things about those things. And you're watching the way that men are, and you're like, I don't want a man there all the time, because he's a dick all the time, because he's allowed to be a dick all the time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to say they're not all that way, you know?
No,
like,
okay. Yeah, totally. But yeah, so what am I saying? I'm saying
there are good people, and there's good people. Yeah. There's a spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, it might attract a higher number, who knows, of abusive, high control individual males.
Yes, I think that's unfortunately true.
And when you have someone that would not be abusive otherwise, they might be influenced to be a little bit more abusive because of the doctrine of the church, because they feel like, well, it's my job to be, because God wants me to, and the prophet says I need to be a heavier hand, and so I have to make sure I lay down the law more, that kind of thing.
I think it's just too easy to get away with abuse if you're an abusive person, because, like I said before, polygamy is illegal, and they're unlikely to go to law enforcement for help if you're already doing something illegal. So again, polygamy doesn't cause abuse, but it is very fertile ground for it to just grow. So
right, and that is one of the points that one could make to make it not illegal, because when you bring it into the light, then you can actually...
You could like monitor it better and stuff. Yeah.
It's the same with sex work. When you make it illegal, then those individuals, when they are harmed, can't go to the authorities. And it's harmful to the sex workers to make it illegal, right?
I think so. I think it started out like illegal because of maybe just the disdain that people had for it. And then with all the abuse that happened in the FLDS church, there's a documentary on that that's really powerful, but it's also just like really hard to watch. Maybe particularly hard for me, given my history, but it's called Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey. I think that's on Netflix. Anyways, so I feel like they feel justified to keep it illegal because of that and other abuse that's happened within polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Plus, what politician is going to spearhead the movement to legalize polygamy? It's not one of those...
Like, no one's going to take that on. Yeah,
no one's going to raise their hand and say,
Let's
I want to be
happen.
because then you look like a misogynist and a weirdo. Right, yeah. So, just a couple more questions. If you could say something to yourself when you were 15 or 12 before your mom left your dad, what would you say?
There's nothing you can say when you're in that mindset. Like, you cannot help, because people tried. They're like my older siblings and stuff, they tried, and I remember thinking like, oh, you're just bitter and resentful. And I mean, when someone's in that headspace, like, you can't. They just have to come to it on their own when they're ready. And it's the same with, like, if you have a friend who's like in an abusive relationship, like, nothing in the world will get through to them. It's so unfortunate, but it's just...
Is there something soothing or supportive you would want to say to that 12-year-old?
Maybe I would tell myself, I don't know, maybe I could... I don't know. Maybe just that, like, I'm trying to survive. Like, you're trying to survive. It's okay. Like, you're doing what you have to survive. So, like, it'll all get better later, but don't, like, maybe I would tell myself not to be so hard on myself, because I just always felt like I wasn't good enough. But maybe I could tell myself that you're facing a lot of challenges right now, so it's understandable. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'd be a wonderful thing. I think it's really brave of you to talk about this publicly. I think most people... It
is. I won't lie. This is a big deal for me.
Yeah, I think most people shy away from it because they don't want to be stigmatized, right? And I don't have that problem. I never have, actually, because I've always just felt like, I mean, it's not my fault that I was born into a polygamous community. It's not my identity. It's where I landed. But a lot of people, unfortunately, will be stigmatized. They will be labeled, and they will be feared.
I guess I'm okay with that. If they don't want to be my friend, I don't want to be their friend anyways. If that's how they're gonna.
Good for you, yeah. So is there anything else that you wanted to tell the public that we didn't touch on?
One other thing I wanted to say was that basically that it makes it really hard to leave because you're cut off from any other resources. Like, they're really good at kind of inoculating people against looking at any literature that would be oppositional, basically, because we're taught that, these things, like, basically, as surely as there's one true church on the earth, there's an adversary, the devil, who he's actively fighting to tear down that church. And so there's a lot of information out there that's going to try to deceive you and lead you away. And so that stuff, it's not true, and it's only designed, it's specifically designed to confuse you and to challenge your faith. And so for me, for a long time, I would never entertain any kind of information. Like, as soon as people started talking to me about anything that was like clearly bashing on the AUB or anything like that, I was like, oh, I'm turning my ears off. Like, I'm not going to listen to any of that. So I think that's one thing that like the information control is, I think, particularly dangerous.
Yeah, because it perpetuates the adherence to the high control group, because you have essentially inserted a firewall built into your members that as soon as there's any opposition from the outside, it's instantly labeled as the devil, literally. So therefore, not only is it not to be regarded, but it's evil. And so it keeps the members within the group.
Yeah. And another thing is, like, we have, I think, since I'm learning more about thought control and stuff like that, there's a website. It's called freedomofmind.org. Dr. Stephen Hassan helps people recover from cults. So I think these are called like thought-stopping cliches, things that we say, like, oh, we don't know better than God, kind of a thing. Or a big one is like, I'll just put that on the shelf. So like, whenever there's something that you have a really hard time reconciling with, like, in your heart that it's wrong, but at the same time, like, this is what we're taught, and it's like, it's really hard because you're like, well, I know this church is true because I've had so many spiritual experiences, and I've had lots of good associations and everything, but at the same time, this really bothers me. And so we just say, well, I'll put that on the shelf, and when I die, like, it'll all iron itself out. God will explain it to me in a way that makes sense, that I'll finally understand. And so for most people, it's a big shelf.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up Christian, and it was what we called non-denominational, and I refer to it as 70s hippie Christianity, which was all about love and charity and giving and non-judgments, and there wasn't any politics from what I remember. And I've asked my family, and they don't remember politics being discussed at all either. But I do remember this one phrase that we would say, which is that we would hand it up to God or give it to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think on one hand, it's helpful sometimes to just recognize that you don't have control over everything, and having faith or believing in a higher power that has a grand design or will help you, or is there
sometimes
for you.
It helps you cope. That makes sense.
But other times it has this effect of
I just won't worry about it.
Because like you might be in an abusive relationship, for example, and you are being told by other church members or by your partner that it would be ungodly to divorce or something, and you're confused, you don't know what to do, and so you say, well, I'm just going to hand it over to God. Or if you're faced with knowledge of global warming or climate change, you might just say, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to hand it over to God, and then you don't have to change anything, and you just figure, well, God will fix it, when meanwhile you're continuing to engage in a practice that is destructive to your life or to the world or whatever.
Yeah.
Anything else from your notes?
Just wanted to say, for if there is anyone out there that is from a polygamist group like me that happens to be watching this, Holding Out Help is a good resource here, at least in Utah, if you're in Utah, that they offer free therapy to polygamists. And I was really hesitant to do it. I thought it would be like dramatic of me or something, because it's not like in the AUB you don't have to like escape, like you're free to leave, if you want to. So I didn't want to be dramatic, but they're really helpful, and there's there's legitimate reasons to accept the help.
Yeah, and it's a specialty that not everyone has. I have had experts on the show over the years that have taught me that the average therapist doesn't know enough to be able to talk with former cult members in a way that is ideal, and might even not be helpful, might even be harmful. Like the idea of that we were talking about earlier about how if you just bash on the cult to even a former cult member, it can really alienate them and cause them to engage in that cliche or that thought stopping. And you have to go slow. You have to enter their world. And, in your mind, you might have a stance that you believe that the cult is evil, but to just come out strong and, assume, okay, you're out of the cult, so I can talk freely about all of my opinions. You agree with me because you left the cult, is very shocking. It can be very alienating. It can be demeaning in a way.
Yeah, it can be really uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right. And that's just one aspect of the expertise that's required. There's many others of how to be with people maybe for years while they still believe in a notion from the cult that as a therapist is destructive to that client, and just going slow and not labeling it, not attacking it necessarily, because it takes a long time.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, and just, yep. Exactly. Yeah. And I also wanted to say, you're very intuitive because I watch your episodes on Sister Wives, and there's so many times where you pose a question and you're like, oh, I don't know. And then I'm like, oh, I wish I was there. I could tell him. And then you guess it, and like the one that was so crazy was, when you said, well, probably Cody thinks that it's against God and nature or something, and then he literally said that exact thing.
I know.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I imagine this has been helpful, but also you're guessing a lot of it. You're getting it.
Yeah. Sometimes I am shocked myself. I think my method is to throw a lot of shit against the wall and just some of it happens
Hope
to stick.
Something lands.
Yeah, you yammer long enough like I do, eventually you're going to, a broken clock is right twice a day. But also, I've been studying this more and more.
No, it has to be that. It has to be that. I'm like, no, he understands in a way that he must have done some research.
Yeah, the Duggar deep dive was very illuminating to me. It's not the same thing, but there's a lot of parallels. And
yeah, there are.
Yeah, and it's a part of American life that I thought was a very small minority. I thought that people that lived like this, not just polygamist Mormon groups, but also, but more largely IBLP and all that kind of indoctrination. I thought it would be, I knew about Westboro Baptist Church, the membership is, I think, 30 people or something. But IBLP is almost mainstream within central United States,
Yeah.
I think of it, the phrase I have in my head is the cult next door.
Yeah, seriously, and it's been really helpful for me to learn how common cults are, and specifically when I first left, to learn about breakoffs of the LDS Church, because I didn't even know there were other breakoffs, so it was like, I'm not unique. This happens. Yeah, it really does. It happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. The final question I have for you, Christine, is a fun one. Who was your favorite cast member of Love is Blind season 6? Gosh.
I think it was, I want to choose, I actually know. It's, can I choose two? Can I choose Chelsea and Jimmy, as a couple?
Yeah.
And it's because, their fights look like mine and my husband's. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like we could have had the same fight. I watched it with my husband, and he was like, oh, I'm on Jimmy's side. So, that was helpful. And also, it's it's good because it's something that we can, kind of laugh about, because we also do, couples counseling, so we can kind of be like, hey, we've come far. So I like those because it's kind of helpful to me to, I guess, that's why I watch your channel, is because I learn.
Well, good for you. I mean, that also takes a lot of bravery, perhaps even more bravery, to be able to look at your own behavior and see a cast member on the show and have your husband say, you kind of do that to me. to not be defensive takes a tremendous amount of maturity and compassion and differentiation. Because a lot of people in your shoes would be like, what are you talking about? I'm not like her. Or,
are you kidding me? Yeah.
Yeah. Or Jimmy deserved all that shit. You know what I mean? Or, that shows a lot of maturity and strength in you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel really proud of us because, so he comes from polygamy too. So we've really had to challenge like everything about the way that we grew up. Like, and I do think that is made for a tough marriage because we're having to like try to scratch everything and start over, and it's pretty difficult. But that is one thing we're really proud of ourselves because not only we broke the cycle, but we've been brave enough to challenge most everything, about I guess how we were told that things should be done. So
well, good for the two of you. So thanks for coming on the show. Christine, I don't know if you want to invite people to reach out to you in some way, because I'm positive.
Okay. Yeah,
people...
no, I'm absolutely. If there's someone I can help, that's why I would want to do this in the first place. So
how can they contact you?
Probably Facebook, Christine Pirir, Pirir. So that'd be a good way. And I mean, I like to talk to other people. Even like there's a YouTube channel. There's a couple. Like there's one. I don't remember any of the names of them, but I like to watch them. There's one that focuses on the FLDS group, like an ex-member of that one, and then another lady she left the Kingston group. And so I've reached out to those guys and just to say like, hey, thanks for what you're doing and stuff like that. So even if you're not like from the AUB, there's and the AUB's like it's bad, but it's not as bad as the FLDS. Like, the FLDS is horrible. So if anyone ever wanted to talk to me, I'm totally down.
Thanks, Christine, for coming on the show. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Why should people take care of themselves, Christine?
Because they deserve it. They really, really do. Thanks for letting me say that. That was so awesome. That was my favorite part.
Oh, good.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Honda.
Well, it was really great talking with you, and I learned a lot. And like I said, I really commend you. I don't think you understand how liberating it will be for people that are in your shoes, both pre and post leaving, not just AUB, but, IBLP, or even just an abusive relationship in a family or something. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's the norm to put your head down and be ashamed, and for you to be able to talk about this openly is, I don't know if I probably wouldn't be able to do it if I were in your shoes.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you.